right, good morning, everyone. My name is Katie Edmond, and I'm here today representing the group that worked on New York City's residential recycling programs. Before I get started, I'd like to first thank my entire workshop team, our faculty advisor, Louise, Rosen, and our client. During my time today, I'll tell you a bit about who our client is and the project they wanted us to work on this semester. I'll explain our findings as well as several recommendations. Our client was the New York City Department of Sanitation's Bureau of Waste Prevention, Reuse, and Recycling. As their name implies, this department handles the city's recycling programs. They wanted us to analyze the interest and enrollment in their voluntary residential recycling programs in order to identify optimal areas for outreach and marketing efforts and thereby get more people involved in these programs. Why get more people involved? Because at present, New Yorkers only recycle about half of what they could possibly be recycling, and everything that is not diverted to recycling has to be shipped out of state at great economic and environmental cost. Now, other cities across the nation are adopting aggressive recycling targets to mitigate this costly problem, but New York is uniquely challenged by its size, density, and housing stock. New York is the most populous city in the country and one of the densest, and this density has everything to do with New York City's housing composition. The majority of residences in the city are multifamily buildings, and as you can see here, over 60% of the city's housing is in buildings with 4 or more units, while only a small percentage is in single-family housing. This housing composition, combined with the sheer size of the population, makes enforcing an individual household's recycling behavior extremely difficult. So, to encourage recycling in these difficult-to-enforce multifamily apartment buildings, Sanitation has established a number of great residential recycling programs. The oldest and largest of these is the Apartment Building Recycling Initiative, or ABRE. Run by the department, this program educates residents and building managers on how to improve recycling of metal, glass, plastics, and paper within their apartment buildings. A challenge associated with this program is getting people to attend the required in-person training session. Refashion is a partnership between Sanitation and a nonprofit company that diverts textiles, like old clothing, shoes, and fabric scraps, from their waste stream. eCycle, a separate contracted partnership, aims to remove toxic electronic waste from the general waste stream. Now, you will notice some similarities between Refashion and eCycle, and in fact, more often than not, if a building is enrolled in more than one of any of the programs, it's enrolled in both Refashion and eCycle. Both programs are contracts between Sanitation and private partners, and in both programs, large bins are installed in the apartment building into which residents deposit their unwanted textiles and e-waste. Those bins are then picked up by the contracted partner. And the large size of these bins has proven to be a challenge for interested buildings. You'll also notice that all 3 programs have building unit minimums, as they are intended for multifamily residences. And it's important to remember that these programs are not the only recycling mechanisms in the city. They're just the ones that our client has asked us to study this semester. To inform our analysis of the current trends in interest and enrollment in these programs, we used a variety of tools. We used Geographic Information Systems, or GIS, to map out the current extent of enrollment and identify areas for optimal outreach. We constructed a statistical model that would assess the correlations between program enrollment and a variety of demographic factors. And those correlations were informed and supported by literature review and expert interviews. Using these approaches, this is what we found. Our major finding confirmed a suspicion that our client had shared with us from the very beginning, that there was a significant drop-off between the sites that were interested in participating and those who actually completed the enrollment process. With this drop-off in mind, we decided to develop a 2-pronged approach to increasing overall enrollment. First, we needed to identify areas to increase interest in these programs so that more buildings would fill out the initial interest forms. Second, we needed to narrow this gap between interest and enrollment. One way to increase enrollment is to address the needs of those sites that were interested but did not enroll, which I'll return to later. Now, our client does not have any published enrollment goals, but they do have soft goals of a few hundred new buildings each year in the short term, with the hope of eventually enrolling all 30,000 eligible buildings in the city. Back to our analysis of current enrollment, among the buildings participating in each program, there was a relationship between the enrollment and the type of building. As you can see, co-ops have the highest proportional representation in each program, followed by rentals and condos. This trend is especially notable in the two newer programs, Refashion and eCycle. This represents a great opportunity for the city, as most housing stock in the city is multifamily housing like co-ops and rentals. Looking at this very generalized map of residence type distributions in the city, we can begin to see areas of potential expansion for these multifamily residential recycling programs. In green are 1 and 2 family dwellings that would not be eligible for the programs, but in pink are areas that theoretically are eligible. Now, we did want to get a bit more in depth in this visual overview, so we used a GIS tool that allowed us to consider a number of factors. We knew we wanted to find areas that had high percentages of co-ops and multifamily rentals because of this positive correlation between enrollment and housing type. We also wanted areas that have high percentages of current enrollment in the programs, as well as a higher rate of recycling at present. We did also consider a handful of economic and social factors that have been shown to affect recycling behavior. Now, the GIS tool that we used allowed us to rank the importance of each factor. So we were able to give more weight to the factors that our own data analysis had shown were significant, specifically the residence type, current program enrollment, and current recycling rates, and much less weight to these other factors. Using that tool, this is what we produced. Shown here are the optimal areas for outreach for the apartment building recycling initiative. We have similar maps for Refashion and eCycle, and the maps are overall very similar with just a few areas that differ. Again, the most significant factor in this analysis was the residence type, which our own analysis had shown was strongly correlated with enrollment in these voluntary residential recycling programs. The darker areas have high percentages of co-ops and multifamily rentals, as well as current enrollment in the residential recycling programs, and a higher rate of recycling overall. You'll notice that large parts of Brooklyn and Queens show up lighter, and that's due to their higher percentages of 1 or 2 family dwellings that would not be eligible for participation in the programs that we were studying. You'll also notice that these data are organized by community district. We believe that these local administrative units will be useful resources for sanitation to organize outreach and communication. Now, after focusing outreach on areas that currently have high program enrollment and high recycling rates, the Department of Sanitation could consider a few long-term strategies to reach out to areas that currently do not have high enrollment and high recycling rates. Operational challenges can help to narrow the gap between interest and enrollment by addressing the problems experienced by sites who were interested in participating but did not fully enroll, and those changes can include more flexible ABRE trainings. Additionally, creating a comprehensive marketing strategy that utilizes local communication networks in New York's 59 community districts could further enhance targeted outreach efforts. These internal strategies would require a degree of reorganization and budget allocation that currently is not a priority for the department, but could be adopted as these programs continue to grow. Finally, policy strategies such as source reduction and single-stream recycling, as well as economic incentives such as pay-as-you-throw, could help induce larger-scale behavioral changes from residents. However, these changes require more committed time, more money, and more political commitment from not only the Department of Sanitation, but from the rest of the city government and the general public. To conclude, in order to increase the rate of recycling in New York City, the Department of Sanitation has created 3 voluntary residential recycling programs: the Apartment Building Recycling Initiative, Refashion, and eCycle. So far, these programs have enjoyed relatively high enrollment in co-ops and multifamily rentals, and there are a number of buildings that participate in more than one of the 3 programs. By focusing outreach on community districts that have high percentages of these housing types and high current enrollment, sanitation can increase the interest and enrollment in these programs. As I mentioned earlier, cities across the country are implementing aggressive recycling targets, but New York is different. No other city in the country has the population size or mix of housing that New York does, so no other city faces the same recycling challenges. These are New York problems that need New York solutions, and these programs are New York City solutions. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and I'm now happy to take any questions that you have.
Thanks, Katie. You mentioned that New York ships all of its waste out of state, and that just seems like such a glaring statistic that New Yorkers maybe aren't aware of. But I was curious, how much do we pay for that, and is there pushback from, I'm assuming, New Jersey, who collects our waste?
It is definitely a highly politically charged issue because there is a relationship with other states that have to process this waste, and shipping the waste out of state costs New Yorkers about $1 million a day, totaling over $300 million per year. So it is definitely a problem that has a lot of implications for other issues within the city.
So is part of the mid to long-term plan to collect the waste again in New York, or is that just not an option on the table?
At present, that's not currently under advisement, but programs like this that divert as much waste as possible from going to landfills are preferred solutions for the department.
Thanks.
More diversion, lower costs for shipping waste out of state.
Given the large percentage of rental in your graphs of interest, and then the disparity between that and enrollment, was the interest the actual renters, and then the building owner has to be the one to enroll, or can the renters enroll in the program themselves?
That was certainly one of the roadblocks on the path to enrollment. Anybody is welcome to express interest in the programs, whether they're residents or building managers, but since you need the cooperation of your building manager, many sites did not have full cooperation with the building managers, so they weren't able to fully enroll. So that's certainly one of the issues, is getting building managers completely on board with these programs as well.
Time for one more question, if there is one. Okay.
All right,
very
thank you
much.
so much.